In 2015, 32 years of Warhammer fantasy came to its conclusion, making way for the rise of the Age of Sigmar. Now, there have been many a video made examining this little piece of tabletop history, but this is not one of those videos. Hello, my name's Nathaniel, and today we'll be exploring how to breathe new life into some old school fantasy concepts. Like many people, I was introduced to the Warhammer world through the Total War games. I had never painted up armies of square-based Tomb Kings or Bretonnians, and both were long gone before I ever even picked up a Games Workshop model. But through the Total War games, I fell in love with the setting. Coincidentally, I also fell in love with the mortal realms of Age of Sigmar. They both have their own taste of the fantasy genre, and I am all for both. I wanted to make an army that blended these two identities, a force that celebrates the rich history of the setting as a whole. The pantheon of the world that was is vast and varied, but one stuck out to me from the others. Ulrich, the god of war, winter, and wolves, was actually the god that Sigmar himself used to worship back when he was just a mortal and didn't have an entire tabletop game named after him. This seemed like the perfect bridge between the two worlds. In the first Gotrek and Felix novel, one of the most popular series of books set in the old Warhammer fantasy world, the famed duo of adventurers encounter the Children of Ulrich, a mysterious sect of Ulrichans capable of transforming themselves into wolf-like hybrids, essentially werewolves. These people were either revered or feared by the worshippers of Ulrich as a whole, but the concept greatly intrigued me. When making his famed Stormcast Eternals, perhaps some sentimentality for his old devotion sparked, or maybe it was just their reputation as incredible warriors, but for whatever reason, Sigmar forged the souls of those most devoted to the wolf god Ulrich into new immortal bodies. With this, I started developing the lore that would drive the army's creation. I read up on the old Ulrichan religion, paying special attention to its tenets. No helmets, no crossbows, no gunpowder. To bring in some high fantasy flair, I decided that the dark and gritty warriors would need a touch of magic. Maybe some glacial weapons to better serve the Lord of Winter? The Stormcast masks are rather iconic, so I'd need replacements if I planned for an entirely unhelmed army. I found some wonderful heads that seemed rugged and wild from the website Puppets War, and then I came across these werewolf heads and a light bulb lit up. When a Stormcast dies, they're reforged back into life, but the process is flawed. What if this flaw referenced back to that Gotrek and Felix novel? What if every time one of these bodies come back, they return more feral and wolf-like? And just like that, the Children of Ulrich were reborn once more into the mortal realms. These Stormcast are first and foremost dedicated to the memory of the now dead god Ulrich. So I wanted to get rid of the overly ostentatious representations of Sigmar on the models and add some wolf pelt lined cloaks to further push that visual identity. I picked up some additional accessories such as new shields for my basic troops from Skibor that really accented the barbarian aesthetic. I was pretty happy with where I was starting. I started my conversions by rolling out some green stuff, not worrying too much about keeping things too clean. Rough and ready is the order of the day with these warriors, and any textures added in the process will not be detrimental. I then used my hobby blade to cut vaguely cloak-like shapes and press them around the shoulders of the models. I waited a few hours for the green stuff to harden a bit and then shaped in some curves and folds to look a little more dynamic. I rolled out a big caterpillar of green stuff around the shoulders to make the pelt, and using overlapping layers of slashes, I built up the fur texture. I cut up some sprue to make some ruined basing materials and then gave all the bases a healthy helping of some texture paste. I did my basic routine of black prime and white zenithal to have a good base to work with. I then did a rough blast of silver from my airbrush to establish the base color for my armor. Stormcast are mostly armor, so this was a huge time saver for the project. I picked out the trim of the armor with a bright gold to break up some uniformity, and I used a bright red transparent paint as a spot color, particularly for cloth and some metallics. Some basic brown for leather straps and some warm off-whites for parchment filled out the rest of the model. Finally, I used a light gray to add some depth to my fur. I mixed up a dark muddy brown to paint my ground texture and picked out the stonework and plant life in gray and green respectively. I painted up the skin and hair in a variety of tones before applying some barbarian war paint to personalize each model. During the building process, I had taken a rather bold step to personalize the army, and I clipped this extravagant flag off of this model in exchange for one of my own, one less Sigmar-y. Using a cut-up soda can, I glued the new flag onto the shaft and primed it black. I gave a central zenithal to help brighten things up before giving the whole thing a red coat. I should have been more careful with overspray, but the simple color scheme made it a breeze to fix. I did a rough sketch of freehand for the banner to give an old medieval heraldry vibe, of course including a wolf. Next comes the big step. I gave every model a spray of a dark and dingy enamel wash, making sure to get these models properly grimdark. I used some cotton swabs and mineral spirits to wipe away the excess, leaving a dirty filter over all of my previous layers. After everything had dried, I layered white on all of the weapons and shield accents. A light blue wash following after gave a nice hardened ice appearance that I was looking for. I mixed up some snow texture using neon, baking soda, and white ink and spread that all over the bases. I then used a few shades of blue to add some frozen color to the snow, and then gave all these icy parts a gloss varnish to give them a wet appearance. I gave the rims a red color and they were done. Now let's look at the newly resurrected Children of Ulrich. This was a really interesting project. Each model got some conversion work and ended up looking pretty neat in my opinion. Some of my favorite little aspects are the wolf head on the Lord Imperator's shoulder and the 3 sets of freehand work. I'm not really good at freehand, but it was fun to experiment. The line Fuimos ante Sigmar is a rough Latin translation. I really didn't feel like pulling out my Latin books to spell check, but it means we were before Sigmar, a sentiment I felt was really appropriate for this group. This was a quick project. I actually had intended to get these models ready in time for a local slow grow league, but that didn't quite pan out, but they were still a great time. I really enjoyed blending my 2 beloved worlds together and making my own lore to build on in the future. Plus, all the extra Stormcast bits will come quite in handy for a project I have in mind for the future. This was Punic Painting, and thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw, and feel free to post your own ideas for a custom army lore in the comments. I'd love to hear what people are making out there. Until next time, have a good one.